Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The morning sun peers through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lachlan Mercer's penthouse, casting long shadows across Italian marble floors. At 36, he'd built an empire that dominated Chicago's skyline, each gleaming tower a testament to his ruthless determination. Today, that same determination would serve a different purpose. Lachlan adjusted his tie, the silk smooth against his fingers. His reflection in the window showed a man in his prime, tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. But it was his eyes that commanded attention. Cold, calculating, focused on the city sprawled before him like a chessboard. His phone buzzed. A message from Odessa lit up the screen. "Don't be late to the baby shower, darling. Everyone's expecting you at 2. 6 months. He'd waited 6 months for this moment. Ever since that rainy Tuesday night when August Navarro had walked into his office with a manila envelope, the memory surfaced with crystal clarity. He'd been reviewing acquisition proposals, the clock pushing past midnight, when August knocked. "Sir," August had said, his usual stoic expression troubled. "There's something you need to see." The photos inside the envelope told a story. Odessa, his wife of 3 years, entering his half-brother Callum's downtown apartment. The timestamps showed a pattern always on Wednesday afternoons, always when Lachlan had standing meetings with overseas investors. The final photo showed them together on Callum's balcony, locked in an embrace that left no room for innocent explanations. Lachlan hadn't raged, hadn't thrown things, hadn't even changed expression. Instead, he looked at August and said, "Keep watching. Document everything. And give me Zadie Vance." His phone buzzed again, pulling him back to the present. This time it was Zadie, his longtime friend and lawyer. "Documents are ready. Final chance to reconsider." His fingers moved swiftly across the screen. No reconsideration needed. Proceed as planned. Zadie had been invaluable these past months, working tirelessly to ensure every legal detail was perfect. The prenup modifications, the business transfers, the trust fund clauses, all of it crafted with precision that would make it unassailable in court. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Inside, Lachlan pressed the button for the garage level, his mind drifting to another conversation from those early days of discovery. "Your parents," August had said, standing in Lachlan's office late one night. "They've been meeting with Callum in Odessa regularly. Private dinners, closed-door conversations." Lachlan had laughed then, a sound devoid of humor. "Of course they have. They've always favored him, their precious younger son. Why should this be any different?" The memory of his childhood surfaced unbidden. Barbara and Roland Mercer, always pushing Callum forward, always making excuses for his failures while demanding perfection from Lachlan. Every success Lachlan achieved was met with cool indifference. While Callum's smallest efforts earned lavish praise, the garage was cool and dim, the sound of his footsteps echoing off concrete walls. His Bentley waited in its reserved spot, the dark blue paint gleaming under fluorescent lights. "Sir?" The garage attendant appeared at his elbow. "Would you like me to have someone drive you today?" "No." Lachlan's voice was steady, controlled. "Some things a man needs to do himself." He slid behind the wheel, the leather seat conforming to his body. Before starting the engine, he pulled out his phone one last time and opened the secure folder where he kept the surveillance photos. Odessa and Callum entering his brother's building. The two of them at intimate dinners in private clubs. His parents meeting them at a lawyer's office, probably planning how to challenge the prenup. Let them plan. Let them scheme. They had no idea what was coming. The engine purred to life. Lachlan checked his watch. 1:30 p.m. Perfect timing. The drive to the Drake Hotel would take exactly 15 minutes, putting him at the rooftop venue right on schedule. Every detail mattered today. As he navigated through downtown traffic, his mind turned to the documents waiting in his jacket pocket. Months of preparation, of careful maneuvering, all leading to this moment. The prenup with its ironclad adultery clause. The business ownership transfers that would leave Odessa grasping at smoke. The trust fund modifications that would ensure any child of Callum's would never see a penny of Mercer money. His phone buzzed once more. August, security team in position. Guests arriving. Parents and Callum already on site. Good. Let them all gather. Let them think they had the upper hand. By sunset, they'd understand exactly who they were dealing with. The Drake Hotel rose before him, its historic facade a monument to old Chicago money. Lachlan pulled into the circular drive, where a valet hurried forward. "Welcome to the Drake, Mr. Mercer." Lachlan handed over his keys, straightened his jacket, and walked into the lobby. The game was about to begin, and he intended to savor every moment that in the elevator. He caught his reflection in the polished brass panels. The man staring back showed no trace of the betrayal he'd endured, no hint of the fury he'd contained these past months. Instead, his expression was one of calm confidence, the look of a man who knew exactly how his enemies would fall. The elevator climbed steadily toward the rooftop, carrying him closer to the moment of reckoning. Everything was in place. Everyone was exactly where they needed to be. Lachlan Mercer allowed himself a small smile. It was time to show them all why crossing him had been their last mistake. The elevator doors opened to reveal the Drake Hotel's crown jewel, its rooftop garden. Spring sunshine bathed the space in calculated perfection, highlighting elaborate flower arrangements in soft pink and white. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light, creating prisms across white-clothed tables. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner, their music drifting across the afternoon air. Lachlan stepped onto the rooftop, taking in the scene with practiced ease. Every detail screamed expense, from the hand-painted place cards to the imported roses. Odessa had clearly spared no expense with his money, probably assuming it would be her last chance to spend it freely. She'd always had expensive taste, something that had once amused him. Now it just added another layer to her betrayal. "Lachlan," his mother's voice cut through the ambient chatter. Barbara Mercer approached, her Chanel dress rustling, her face painted with that familiar false warmth. The diamonds at her throat, his Christmas gift from 2 years ago, sparkled as she moved. "We were starting to worry you wouldn't make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Mother." His tone was pleasant, but his eyes remained cold. Over her shoulder, he spotted his father by the bar, already working on what looked like his second scotch. Roland Mercer had always believed money could solve any problem, especially problems he'd created himself. "Your brother's been asking about you," Barbara said, her hand touching his arm. "He wants to talk before?" "Before what, Mother?" Lachlan's smile didn't waver, but his voice carried an edge that made her step back. "Before the grand announcement? Don't worry. I'm exactly where I need to be." Confusion flickered across her face, quickly replaced by practiced social poise. "I just think it would be good if you two could clear the air. Family should stick together." Family. He let the word hang between them. Interesting choice of words. Before she could respond, a ripple went through the crowd. Odessa had appeared, radiant in a cream-colored Valentino maternity dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her hand rested protectively over her swollen belly as she made her way through the guests. Accepting congratulations with practiced grace, Lachlan watched her approach, noting the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd always been good at hiding her tells, but he'd had years to learn them. "Darling," she cooed, reaching for a kiss. He turned slightly, letting her lips brush his cheek instead. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, there and gone in an instant. "I was worried you'd be caught up at the office. And miss this?" His gesture encompassed the elaborate setup. "You've outdone yourself. Only the best for our little one." Her hand pressed against her belly, and something dark flashed in Lachlan's eyes. She caught it, her own gaze narrowing slightly before she covered with another smile. "Come, you should greet everyone. The Vanderwells just flew in from New York, especially for this." He allowed her to lead him through the crowd, playing his part perfectly. Handshakes with business associates, small talk with society wives, congratulations from people who'd be whispering about the scandal within hours. Through it all, he kept track of Callum from the corner of his eye. His younger half-brother was trying to look casual by the champagne fountain, but the tremor in his hands when he reached for a glass gave him away. Callum had always been the family favorite. Charming, sociable, everything their parents wanted in a son. But charm couldn't cover his mounting debts or his habit of taking what didn't belong to him. "Quite a turnout," August murmured, appearing at Lachlan's elbow with a glass of water. His security team was positioned strategically around the rooftop, dressed to blend in with the guests. Everyone who's anyone in Chicago is here to witness it. Good? Lachlan took the water, his voice low. I want witnesses. The next hour passed in a carefully choreographed dance. Lachlan played his role flawlessly. The proud father-to-be, the successful businessman, the loving husband. He accepted congratulations with gracious nods, discussed market trends with investors, and even managed a civil conversation with Roland about the Bears' chances this season, but he noticed everything. The way Callum kept checking his phone, growing more agitated with each glance. The silent exchanges between his parents, loaded with meaning. The subtle way Odessa kept watching the clock, her composure cracking just slightly around the edges. It's time. August's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece Lachlan wore. They're moving into position. Right on cue, Odessa moved to the center of the room, champagne glass in hand. The string quartet fell silent at her gesture, and conversations died away as guests turned expectantly toward their hostess. Everyone, her voice carried across the rooftop, clear and controlled. If I could have your attention, please? Lachlan took his position, off to the side where he could see everyone's faces. His parents drew closer together, Roland's arm sliding around Barbara's waist in what looked like support, but felt more like preparation. Callum edged toward Odessa, trying to make it seem casual and failing miserably. The air grew thick with anticipation. Guests shifted, sensing something beyond a normal baby shower speech was coming. Odessa's hand trembled slightly as she raised her glass, but her voice remained steady. First, I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate this special day with us. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd before finding Lachlan's. But there's something else I need to say. Something that can't wait any longer. The moment stretched, tension building. Lachlan could see it all playing out in his mind how they'd planned this. Thinking to humiliate him in front of Chicago's elite. Thinking they could force his hand with a public spectacle. Thinking they had him cornered, they had no idea what was coming. Lachlan. Odessa's voice softened as she turned to face him directly, her champagne glass catching the afternoon light. I know this will hurt, but the truth is... She drew a steadying breath, her free hand protectively cradling her belly. Callum is the father of my baby. The words fell into silence like stones into still water, creating ripples of shocked gasps and muffled exclamations across the rooftop. A fork clattered against china somewhere in the crowd, the sound sharp and jarring in the suspended moment. I deserve my share of your success, Odessa continued, her chin lifting with rehearsed defiance. For our child's future. Callum stepped forward then, moving to stand beside her. His attempt at a confident stance was betrayed by the slight sway in his step, too much champagne for courage. Brother, he started, then seemed to lose his nerve as Lachlan's gaze settled on him. The murmurs grew louder. Phones appeared in hands around the rooftop as Chicago's elite sensed the scandal unfolding before them. This was exactly what they'd hoped for. A public spectacle that would force Lachlan's hand, trap him into negotiating to save face, but Lachlan didn't rage. Didn't shout. Didn't even flinch. Instead, he smiled. The expression sent a visible shiver through Odessa. She'd expected anger, prepared for it. This calm reaction clearly wasn't in her script. Is that all? His voice carried across the space, measured and almost amused. The crowd fell silent again, waiting. Watching. That's all. Odessa's voice cracked slightly. Lachlan, I just told you that you've been sleeping with my brother. He took a slow sip of water, his movements deliberate. That the child you're carrying is his. That you expect to be rewarded for your betrayal. He set the glass down with a soft clink. Did I miss anything? Barbara stepped forward, her social mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. This wasn't going according to their plan at all. Lachlan, please. Let's discuss this privately. Why privately, Mother? Lachlan's eyes never left Odessa's face. Wasn't the whole point of this to make it public? To shame me into submission in front of all our friends and associates? He gestured to the crowd. Well, you have your audience. Let's give them a show. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, the cream-colored paper expensive and precise, like everything else in his world. Speaking of shows, I have something you might want to see. What's that? Odessa's voice had lost its practiced confidence, a tremor creeping in at the edges. Just some light reading. He crossed the space between them unhurriedly, aware that every eye in the place was fixed on him. Consider it my baby shower gift. Odessa took the envelope with visibly trembling fingers. As she read, the color drained from her face in stages, like a sunset in reverse. Her free hand clutched her belly as though for support. This can't be legal, she whispered, papers shaking in her grasp. Oh, but it is. Lachlan's voice carried in the silence, calm and precise. The prenup you signed? The one you clearly didn't read carefully enough? Section 7.3 specifically states that in the case of adultery, you get nothing. Not a penny. Callum snatched the papers from Odessa's limp fingers, his eyes scanning frantically. This isn't possible. You can't what, little brother? Lachlan's tone was almost gentle, but his eyes were arctic. Can't protect what's mine? Can't see through your pathetic schemes? You might want to look at page 2. All business ownership has been transferred out of my personal name. And page 3? That trust fund clause you were all counting on? Any claims by an illegitimate child are void. The papers slipped from Callum's hands, scattering across the marble floor like fallen leaves. The sound of their settling seemed to echo in the stunned silence. You've known, Odessa whispered, realization dawning in her eyes. All this time you've known? Of course I knew. Lachlan straightened his already perfect tie. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't prepare for snakes in my garden? We can explain. Callum started forward, but froze as 2 security guards materialized behind him. This isn't what you think. No explanations needed. Lachlan's voice cut through the air like a blade. The photos were quite explicit. The surveillance reports very thorough. Would you like me to share those with our guests as well? Barbara pushed between them, her carefully maintained composure cracking. Lachlan, you can't just disown family over a mistake. Blood is blood. Your brother deserves a second chance, Roland added, finally leaving his post by the bar. We're family. Lachlan's laugh echoed across the rooftop, devoid of any warmth. Family? He turned to face his parents, his expression hardening. Was it family when you secretly met with them at Richardson's law firm 3 weeks ago, planning how to challenge the prenup? Was it family when you helped Callum set up offshore accounts to hide his debts? Roland's face paled. How did you know? Lachlan finished for him. I know everything. Every meeting. Every phone call. Every pathetic attempt to undermine me. He pulled another envelope from his jacket. Would you like to see the proof? I have my team document it all. Barbara's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat, clutching the diamond necklace he'd given her. Lachlan, you're not thinking clearly. This anger, this paranoia implies I'm imagining things, Mother. He opened the second envelope, removing a stack of photographs. Like this image of you and Father meeting with Odessa's lawyer last month. Or these bank statements showing how you've been helping Callum hide money from his creditors. Shall I continue? The string quartet had long since stopped playing, the musicians watching the drama unfold with barely concealed fascination. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rooftop as Lachlan methodically laid out photo after photo on a nearby table. You had us followed. Odessa's voice trembled with indignation. Spied on? Rich, coming from the woman who tried to access my private servers 3 times in the past month. Lachlan's smile was razor sharp. Did you really think I wouldn't have alerts set up? That I wouldn't notice when you installed that keylogger on my home office computer? Callum stepped forward, desperation breaking through his facade. Look, we can work something out. The baby is your problem now? Lachlan cut him off, though I have to admire the timing. Waiting until Odessa was showing before making your move. Did you think a visible pregnancy would force my hand? Make me more likely to settle to avoid scandal. It wasn't like that, Odessa protested, but her voice lacked conviction. We fell in love. Love. Lachlan's voice could have frozen flame. Was it love when you discussed how to maximize your settlement with your lawyer? When you planned this whole spectacle to humiliate me into submission? He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. Would you like to hear the recordings? Roland moved forward, trying to salvage the situation. Son, you're making a scene. Think about your reputation. My reputation? Lachlan's eyes locked onto his father. You mean the reputation I built while you were busy covering Callum's gambling debts? The one I earned while you were telling everyone who would listen that I was too cold, too calculating, too focused on business? He turned to address the stunned crowd. Let me be perfectly clear about what's happening here. My wife conspired with my brother to extort money from me using a pregnancy as leverage. My parents actively aided them, hoping to force me into a settlement that would secure their own financial interests. Phones were recording now, dozens of them capturing every word. Chicago's elite had come expecting a baby shower. They were getting a masterclass in revenge instead. The prenup is ironclad, Lachlan continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the rooftop. The business transfers are complete and legal. The trust fund has been restructured. Every document has been vetted by the top law firms in 3 countries. He lifted his water glass in a mock toast. You wanted to play games? Consider this checkmate. Lachlan, please. Odessa moved toward him, tears streaming down her face. Don't do this. We can talk about this privately. The time for private conversations ended when you chose public humiliation as your strategy. He set his glass down with deliberate care. You want an audience? Well, now they'll witness everything. Security guards moved closer, their presence becoming more obvious. August appeared at Lachlan's side, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes alert. As of this moment, Lachlan's voice cut through the tension like a surgeon's blade. Callum Mercer no longer exists. He's stripped of the Mercer name, cut off from any inheritance or connection to my companies. His gaze swept to his parents. And you too? Consider yourselves equally disinherited. The weight of Lachlan's words seemed to physically press down on the rooftop garden. Barbara swayed slightly, her hand seeking Roland's arm for support. Callum's face had gone ashen, the reality of his situation finally breaking through his alcohol-induced bravado. You can't mean this, Barbara whispered, her society mask cracking completely. We're your parents. Everything we did was for this family. For this family? Lachlan's voice could have cut diamond. Tell me, Mother, was it for the family when you encouraged Callum to pursue corporate espionage against my company? When you helped him try to steal my clients? He withdrew a final document from his jacket. Or perhaps you'd like to explain these emails? The ones where you coached Odessa on how to maximize her settlement? Where you suggested she get pregnant to secure her position? The paper trembled in Barbara's manicured fingers as she read. Roland tried to peer over her shoulder, but she crumpled the document, as if destroying the evidence could somehow undo their schemes. You've gone too far. Roland's face flushed red with anger. You think you can just erase us? We made you who you are. No. Lachlan's reply was ice cold. You tried to break me at every turn. Each time I succeeded, you found ways to undermine it. Each achievement was met with criticism, while Callum's failures were excused and covered up. He turned to his brother, who had begun to edge toward the elevator. Going somewhere, Callum? Perhaps to call your bookie? Or those loan sharks you've been avoiding? Callum froze, his face draining of what little color remained. How did you know about your gambling debts? The money you embezzled from your investors? Lachlan's smile was predatory. I know everything, brother. Every debt, every scheme, every desperate attempt to dig yourself out of the hole you created. Odessa stepped forward, one hand protectively cradling her belly. Lachlan, think about the child. Your niece or nephew will have nothing to do with me or the Mercer name. His voice cut through her plea like a blade. You made your choice, Odessa. Now you get to live with it. He nodded to August, who spoke quietly into his earpiece. More security personnel materialized from among the guests, moving with quiet efficiency toward the family. You can't do this. Callum lunged forward, but 2 guards caught his arms. That's my child. My future. No. Lachlan's voice was deadly calm. That's your mistake, and you're going to live with the consequences. Odessa began to sob, mascara trailing black tears down her cheeks. Please, Lachlan, we can work something out. I'll do anything. The time for negotiations ended the moment you chose betrayal. He straightened his tie, a gesture of finality. Security will escort you out. Your personal belongings from the mansion have already been packed and will be delivered to whatever address you provide. Barbara made one last attempt, her voice breaking. "Son, please. We're blood. Blood." Lachlan's laugh was bitter. "Blood didn't stop you from plotting against me. Blood didn't prevent your betrayal." His eyes swept over them all. "Consider those bonds severed. Permanently." The security team moved with practiced efficiency. Callum struggled briefly, but subsided when August's hand closed around his arm. Odessa went quietly, tears falling freely now. Barbara and Roland maintained what dignity they could as they were led toward the elevator. "This isn't over," Callum called out as the doors began to close. "You'll regret this." Lachlan watched the elevator doors seal shut on their protests, his expression unreadable. The rooftop had fallen into stunned silence, the assembled guests frozen in place like characters in a tableau, but he turned to address the crowd, his composure perfect despite the drama that had unfolded. "I apologize for the interruption. Please enjoy the rest of the afternoon. The bar is open." Slowly, conversation resumed, though now in hushed, excited whispers. Chicago's elite had just witnessed the fall of half the Mercer family, and the gossip machine was already churning at full speed. Lachlan moved to the edge of the rooftop, looking out over his city. The afternoon sun painted the skyline in shades of gold and shadow, each gleaming tower a testament to what he'd built despite their attempts to tear him down. His phone buzzed. A message from August, Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2? A cold smile curved Lachlan's lips as he typed his response. Begin? The war wasn't over. It was just beginning, and Lachlan Mercer never lost a war. 3 weeks after the baby shower, Lachlan sat in his corner office, reviewing the latest reports from his surveillance team. Chicago's autumn rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a steady rhythm that matched his measured breathing. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Mercer, Ms. Vance is here to see you. Send her in." Zadie Vance strode into the office, her briefcase clutched tightly under one arm. Her usual composed demeanor was slightly ruffled, never a good sign. "They've filed the paperwork," she announced without preamble, dropping a thick folder on his desk. "Odessa's lawyer is Trevor Maxwell." "Maxwell?" Lachlan's eyebrow rose slightly. "Interesting choice. Not exactly known for his subtlety, is he? He's already talking to the press." Zadie pulled up a chair, her expression grim. "Want to hear his exact words?" "Enlighten me." "Mr. Mercer's actions represent a disturbing pattern of controlling behavior and financial abuse," she quoted, her lip curling in disgust. "My client simply seeks what she's legally entitled to after years of supporting her husband's empire building at the expense of her own career." Lachlan's laugh was sharp and sudden. "Her career? The one where she embezzled from her last employer before marrying me." "There's more." Zadie opened her laptop. "The prenuptial agreement was signed under duress, and its terms are unconscionable. We intend to prove that Mr. Mercer created a hostile environment that left Mrs. Mercer no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere." Creative. Lachlan stood, moving to the window. "And predictable. What else?" "They're claiming the business transfers were fraudulent, done specifically to deprive her of marital assets." Zadie's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Maxwell's requesting an emergency hearing to freeze your assets pending investigation. Let me guess, Judge Shopping? Already tried for Harrison and Peters. Both recused themselves." "Of course they did." Lachlan turned back to face her. "They're both on the board of my charitable foundation. Maxwell knows that. He's playing to the press, making it look like I'm buying the judiciary." A sharp knock interrupted them. August entered, his face set in grim lines. "Sir, we have a situation. Callum's been busy." "Define busy." "He's been meeting with Davidson Holdings." August handed over a tablet. 3 meetings in the past week, all off the books." "Davidson?" Zadie looked up sharply. "Aren't they bidding against you on the Riverside development?" "They were." Lachlan scrolled through the surveillance photos. "Until last week, when they suddenly had detailed information about our bid strategy. Information that only someone with inside knowledge would have." "Callum's selling your trade secrets," Zadie concluded. "Can we prove it?" "Better." Lachlan's smile was cold. "We can use it." "August, what's the status of his debts?" "Found 5 more loan sharks he owes money to. Totals up to about $3 million now." August pulled out his phone. Want me to start acquiring the papers? All of them. Lachlan moved back to his desk. But quietly. I don't want him to know we're the ones holding his leash yet. There's something else. Zadie's voice had that careful tone she used when delivering particularly sensitive information. Your parents are talking to the press, too. Barbara gave an interview this morning. Play it. Zadie tapped her phone, and Barbara Mercer's carefully modulated voice filled the office. My son has always struggled with trust issues, stemming from his difficult childhood. Roland and I tried our best, but Lachlan's drive for success often came at the expense of genuine human connections. This situation with Odessa, it's heartbreaking, but not entirely surprising. Laying the groundwork for a mental competency challenge. Lachlan's voice was eerily calm. Looks that way. Zadie shut off the recording. They've hired Patricia Morrison as their lawyer. Morrison? August whistled low. She specializes in corporate takeovers through shareholder actions. Usually targets family businesses with succession disputes. They're going to try to paint me as unstable, Lachlan concluded. Use that to challenge my control of the company. He turned to Zadie. Options? We fight fire with fire. She pulled another file from her briefcase. Remember that audit we did of Callum's time as VP of Development? The position my parents insisted I give him? The same. We found some interesting transfers. Money moving from company accounts to offshore holdings, then somehow finding its way into Roland and Barbara's personal accounts. Lachlan's eyes narrowed. Show me. The next hour was spent reviewing documents, bank statements, and transaction records. Each piece added to a picture of systematic fraud spanning years. They were stealing from me. Lachlan's voice was soft, dangerous. While preaching about family loyalty, they were bleeding my company dry to fund their lifestyle. We have enough to go to the SEC, Zadie offered. Or we could use it as leverage. No. Lachlan's decision was immediate. Hold it in reserve. Let them make their moves first. I want to see exactly how far they'll go before we bury them. His phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. When he opened it, his expression hardened. What is it? August moved closer. A warning. Lachlan held up the phone. From one of Callum's creditors. Apparently my dear brother is getting desperate. Talking about having me dealt with if things don't go his way. Want me to handle it? August's hand unconsciously moved toward his shoulder holster. Not yet. Lachlan's smile was razor-sharp. Let him dig himself deeper. The harder they all try to destroy me, the more ammunition they give us for their own destruction. He turned back to the rain-streaked windows, watching the city lights blur through the water. They wanted a war? Let's give them one they'll never forget. The Davidson Holdings boardroom sat 30 stories above Michigan Avenue, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. James Davidson, the company's silver-haired CEO, leaned back in his leather chair, studying the man across from him. These projections for Mercer's Riverside development. Davidson tapped the documents Callum had brought. You're certain they're accurate? Everything's there. Callum fought to keep his hands steady as he reached for his water glass. Construction estimates, environmental surveys, even the backup funding arrangements with First National. Information that would be highly confidential. Davidson's eyes narrowed. The kind only someone with insider access would have. Let's just say I have a vested interest in seeing my brother's monopoly on Chicago real estate redistributed. Callum attempted a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The question is, what's that worth to you? Before Davidson could respond, his office door swung open. Lachlan Mercer stood in the doorway, August a silent shadow behind him. James, Lachlan's voice was pleasant. Having an interesting meeting? Callum's face went ash-white. How did you know? Lachlan moved into the room with predatory grace. Funny thing about corporate espionage, it works both ways. He turned to Davidson. Those documents he gave you? They're fake. The real plans were submitted to the City Planning Commission an hour ago. Davidson's expression hardened. Mr. Mercer, I assure you, save it. Lachlan dropped a thick folder on the boardroom table. Inside you'll find proof that you've been meeting with my disgraced brother, copies of the money transfers to his offshore account, and documentation of 3 separate violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by your company in the past year. Are you threatening me? Davidson's hand moved toward his phone. Threatening? Lachlan's laugh was cold. No, James. I'm giving you a choice. Either Davidson Holdings withdraws from the Riverside project immediately, or this folder lands on the SEC commissioner's desk tomorrow morning. You can't. Callum started to rise, but August's hand on his shoulder pushed him firmly back into his seat. As for you, little brother, Lachlan's voice dripped contempt. Did you really think I wouldn't have surveillance on every major developer in Chicago? That I wouldn't be watching for exactly this kind of desperate move? I had no choice. Callum's composure cracked. Do you know what those people will do to me if I don't pay? Those people? Davidson looked sharply between the brothers. What people? Oh, didn't he mention? Lachlan's smile was razor-sharp. My brother has some rather pressing gambling debts. Owes money to some very dangerous individuals. Is that what the consulting fee was for, Callum? Trying to stay ahead of the loan sharks? Davidson stood abruptly. Get out, both of you. And Callum, if you ever contact anyone at Davidson Holdings again, I'll have you arrested for corporate espionage. James, please, Callum's voice cracked. I can explain. Now. Davidson jabbed his finger at the door. As they left the boardroom, Lachlan caught his brother's arm in an iron grip. One more thing. The next time you try to sabotage my business, remember, I'm not just watching you. I'm 10 steps ahead of you. You've ruined me, Callum hissed, jerking away. Again, is that what you wanted? Ruined you? Lachlan's voice was deadly quiet. No, brother. This was just a warning shot. Keep pushing, and I'll show you what ruin really looks like. The elevator ride down was silent, tension crackling in the enclosed space. In the lobby, Callum turned to make one last plea. Lachlan, I'm desperate here. These people, they're not going to wait much longer. At least help me clear the debts, like you helped yourself to my company's confidential information. Lachlan straightened his tie. Actions have consequences, Callum. It's time you learned that lesson. Is that what this is about? Teaching me a lesson? Callum's laugh was bitter. You always were Dad's perfect son, weren't you? Always had to prove you were better than everyone else. Perfect son? Now it was Lachlan's turn to laugh. Were we living in the same house? Every achievement I earned, they dismissed. Every success I built, they undermined. While you, his voice hardened. You failed upward your entire life, carried by their constant support and excuses. At least they loved me, Callum shouted, drawing stares from people in the lobby. At least I knew how to be human instead of this. This machine you've become. Love. Lachlan's voice could have frozen flame. Was it love when they helped you steal from my company? When they coached Odessa on how to maximize her settlement? When they plotted to have me declared mentally unfit? He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Callum could hear. The difference between us, brother, isn't that they loved you more. It's that I learned to stop needing their love and started building my own empire. While you, he gestured dismissively. You're still the same parasite you've always been, living off whatever host will take you in. This isn't over. Callum's hands clenched into fists. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. Actually, I do. Lachlan nodded to August, who produced an envelope. Inside, you'll find copies of every debt you owe, every person you've borrowed from, every deadline you've missed. Keep pushing me, and I'll make sure they all come calling at once. The color drained from Callum's face as he read the documents. How did you get copies? The same way I get everything else. Money, influence, and patience. Lachlan turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Callum? Tell Odessa her media strategy isn't working. The more she talks about being a victim, the more evidence surfaces of her own misconduct. Funny how that works? You're going to destroy us all, aren't you? Callum's voice was barely a whisper. No, brother. Lachlan's smile was cold. You did that yourselves the moment you chose betrayal over loyalty. As his brother stood shell-shocked in the lobby, Lachlan strode out into the Chicago afternoon, August falling in a step beside him. Sir, August spoke quietly. The investigators found something else. About your parents' finances. Tell me, it's bigger than we thought. The fraud, the embezzlement, it goes back years. And there's something else. Something about Callum's adoption papers that doesn't add up. Lachlan's eyes narrowed. Give me everything, every detail, every document. If they want to play hardball with the media, Let's see how they handle some real revelations. The war was escalating, and Lachlan intended to use every weapon in his arsenal. The Chicago Tribune's headline screamed across Lachlan's desk, "Mercer family feud, a dynasty divided." Below it, a sympathetic profile of Odessa painted her as a struggling fashion designer trapped in a loveless marriage, who found true connection with her husband's younger brother. "They're pushing hard on the victim narrative," Zadie observed, watching Lachlan read. "Social media's eating it up. Hashtag Justice for Odessa is trending. Public opinion is fickle." Lachlan tossed the paper aside. "What else?" "Your mother's interview with Channel 7 airs tonight. We got an advance copy." Zadie pulled up the video on her tablet. "You should see this." Barbara Mercer's face filled the screen, perfectly made up to show just the right amount of maternal concern. The interviewer leaned forward, voice gentle with practiced sympathy. "Mrs. Mercer, this must be so difficult for you as a mother." "It breaks my heart." Barbara dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Lachlan was always different, so focused on success, on proving himself. "Roland and I worried about his inability to form real connections." "Different how?" "Cold, calculating. He'd spend hours alone in his room as a child, planning business ventures while other kids played. When he started making money, it became an obsession." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "We've consulted specialists. They believe he may have antisocial tendencies." Lachlan's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Specialists? That's new." "There's more." Zadie warned that on screen. Barbara continued. "This vindictive behavior toward Odessa, toward his own brother, it's not normal. Roland and I fear for his mental state. As his parents, we may need to take action to protect both him and the company." "Laying groundwork for the competency challenge," Lachlan observed. "Clever." A knock at the door interrupted them. August entered with Sienna Graves, the investigative journalist they'd been cultivating. "You need to see this." Sienna pulled out her own tablet. "Your wife's been busy." The screen showed Odessa leaving a women's shelter, her face carefully arranged in an expression of fear and vulnerability. Photographers swarmed around her as her lawyer, Trevor Maxwell, made a statement. "Mrs. Mercer has been forced to seek protection due to concerns for her safety," Maxwell announced to the cameras. "The controlling behavior, the surveillance, the financial abuse, it's created an untenable situation. We're filing for an emergency restraining order." "A restraining order?" Zadie's eyebrows shot up. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming your security team's surveillance constitutes stalking," Sienna explained. "They've got photos of August's men following her right to her meetings with industrial spies." Lachlan's voice was cold. "Show them what we found, Sienna." The journalist nodded, pulling up another file. "I've been digging into Odessa's past. Her previous fashion business? It didn't fail naturally. She embezzled nearly $500,000 from her investors, then declared bankruptcy to avoid paying them back. Can we prove it?" "Better." Sienna smiled. "I found one of her former partners. He's willing to go on record about how she seduced him, convinced him to invest his life savings, then vanished with the money. Sound familiar?" "Time it right," Lachlan instructed. "Wait until Maxwell files the restraining order, then run the story. Let's see how the public feels about her victim narrative when they learn about her pattern of targeting wealthy men." His phone buzzed a text from Roland. "Son, this has gone far enough. Meet us tonight, 8 p.m. at the house. We can work this out as a family." "Your father?" Zadie asked, noting his expression. "Trying to arrange a trap." Lachlan showed her the message. "Probably have their lawyers waiting to serve papers." "What's your play?" August asked. "Set up surveillance on the house. I want to know everyone who goes in or out tonight. And give me everything on that adoption angle you mentioned." Sienna's eyes lit up. "Adoption angle?" "Not yet," Lachlan cautioned. "We hold that card until we see their full play. For now, focus on Odessa's past. Build the story piece by piece." "There's something else." August pulled out a file. "Remember that fashion show fundraiser she chaired last year? The one where $100,000 went missing from the children's hospital donation. Let me guess, you found the money trail? Straight to an offshore account. Same one she's been using to hide assets during the divorce." Lachlan's smile was predatory. Perfect. Sienna, how do you feel about a story on charity fraud? That'll play better than the embezzlement, she agreed. Everyone hates someone who steals from sick kids. Sir, August interrupted, checking his phone. Maxwell's calling a press conference for this afternoon. Sources say Odessa's going to make allegations of physical intimidation. Physical intimidation? Zadie scoffed. She's really getting desperate. No, Lachlan's voice was thoughtful. She's getting predictable. August, make sure every security camera feed from every property is archived. When she claims I threatened her, we'll have video proving she was never even in the same building. He stood, moving to the window. They think they can win this in the court of public opinion. That if they paint me as unstable, as dangerous, they can force a settlement. His reflection smiled coldly. Time to show them how dangerous I can really be. What's our next move? Zadie asked. Release the charity fraud story tonight, after Maxwell's press conference. Then have our PR team leak questions about the children's hospital money to every reporter at the event. Let's see how well she handles real journalists instead of sympathetic puff pieces. And your parents? Sienna pressed. The mental competency angle could gain traction. Let them play that card. Lachlan's voice was ice. Because when we reveal what they've been hiding about Callum's adoption, about the company fraud, about their own mental fitness, his smile was razor sharp. The media won't know what hit them. The war for public opinion was escalating, and Lachlan intended to burn their carefully crafted narratives to the ground. August Navarro's office in the Mercer Building basement looked more like a war room than a security station. Multiple screens displayed surveillance feeds, while the walls held maps of Chicago marked with red pins, each representing one of Callum's creditors. Walk me through it, Lachlan commanded, studying the map. Your brother's been busy. August pulled up a spreadsheet. Started with casino debts in Vegas, about $500,000. When he couldn't pay, he borrowed from loan sharks to cover it. When those came due, he borrowed from others to pay the first group. A desperation spiral, Lachlan observed. How deep? $3 million total, spread across 5 major players. August pointed to the map. Victor Petrov on the north side, he's owed $800,000. The Martinez brothers in Pilsen, another $600. Then the door opened, and one of August's men hurried in. Boss, we got movement. Callum just went into the Golden Palace. The Golden Palace? Lachlan's eyebrow rose. That's Eddie Wong's place. The same Eddie Wong who's been trying to muscle in on the Chinatown development deal, August confirmed. Want me to send someone in? No need. Lachlan pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. Eddie? Lachlan Mercer. I hear my brother just walked into your establishment. Yes. I'm aware he owes you money. How much? Interesting. No, don't do anything yet. I have a proposition for you. The conversation lasted 5 minutes. When Lachlan hung up, his smile was cold. Add another $400,000 to the tally. Eddie says Callum's been borrowing against promised insider information about our Chinatown projects. Sir, August hesitated. Some of these people, they're not known for their patience or their gentle collection methods. I'm counting on that. Lachlan moved to the map. Start buying the debts. All of them. But keep it quiet. I don't want Callum knowing we control his leash yet. What about Odessa? She's been seen meeting with some of his creditors. Trying to buy time, no doubt. Promising them a piece of whatever settlement she gets from me. Lachlan's laugh was bitter. How's that working out for her? Not well. August pulled up another screen. After your leak about the children's hospital fraud, her lawyers are scrambling. Maxwell's already missed 2 filing deadlines. The door opened again, revealing Zadie with a stack of files. You need to see this. We found something in the adoption records. Tell me. The timing's wrong. She spread the papers on the desk. According to these documents, Callum was adopted through an agency that didn't exist until 3 years after his supposed adoption date. And the signatures? She pointed to specific lines. The notary's license number belongs to someone who died 2 years before these were signed. Lachlan's eyes narrowed. Meaning the whole adoption was fraudulent. We dug deeper, found birth records in Wisconsin. Callum isn't adopted at all. He's Roland's biological son from an affair. With whom? A woman named Margaret Pierce. She was Roland's secretary in the 80s. Died in a car accident, when Callum was 2. So they faked the adoption to cover up Roland's infidelity. Lachlan's voice was eerily calm. Does Callum know? No evidence he does. But Barbara must have known. The timing of her sudden interest in adoption charities, the large donations to cover paper trails, a knock interrupted them. Another of August's men entered, looking troubled. Sir, we just got word. Callum missed a payment to Petrov. They picked him up outside his apartment an hour ago. Where did they take him? Old warehouse on the north side. Petrov's usual spot for negotiations. Lachlan checked his watch. How long until they start making examples? Knowing Petrov, he'll let him sweat for an hour, then start with fingers. Perfect timing. Lachlan turned to August. How quickly can you buy Petrov's marker? Already done, sir. Just waiting for your word. Good. Get a team together. In 30 minutes, I want you to visit our dear brother. Show him exactly who owns his debts now. He paused, considering. In August, make sure he understands his options disappear from Chicago or deal with all his creditors at once. And if he refuses, then we let Eddie Wong know about his meetings with Petrov. Let them fight over him. Lachlan's smile was predatory. After all, family should share. What about the adoption revelation? Zadie pressed. When do we use that? Hold it. If Barbara and Roland push forward with their competency challenge, that's our nuclear option. Nothing destroys credibility quite like exposed fraud and decades of lies. Another alert blinked on August's screens. Sir, Odessa's lawyer is holding another press conference. She's claiming you've hired thugs to intimidate her. Perfect timing. Lachlan checked his phone. Sienna's story about the children's hospital fraud should be hitting the wires right about now. As if on cue, phones around the room began buzzing with notifications. The story was breaking across all major Chicago news outlets. Mercer divorce scandal. Millions missing from children's charity. Sir, August's voice was cautious. About Callum. How far do you want us to push? Far enough that he understands the situation. Complete and utter desperation. Lachlan moved toward the door. I want him to feel the walls closing in from every side. When you're done, make sure he knows one word from me. And every debt comes due at once. And if he breaks, tries something desperate. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Lachlan's smile was cold. The more desperate he gets, the more mistakes he'll make. And every mistake is another nail in their collective coffin. The war was entering its final phases, and Lachlan intended to make sure every member of his treacherous family felt the full weight of their decisions. The warehouse air reeked of rusted metal and fear. Callum Mercer sat tied to a metal chair, his designer's suit wrinkled and stained with sweat. Viktor Petrov's men had been thorough in expressing their displeasure over his missed payments. Mr. Mercer, Petrov's thick Russian accent filled the space. Perhaps now you understand the seriousness of your situation? Before Callum could respond, the warehouse door creaked open. August Navarro walked in, followed by 2 of his men. The Russians immediately raised their weapons. This is private business, Petrov growled. Leave now. August pulled out a folder. Actually, it's my business now. He handed Petrov a document. As of 20 minutes ago, I own your marker on Mr. Mercer here, along with every other debt he owes in Chicago. Petrov studied the paper, his expression darkening. This is legitimate? Very. My employer believes in consolidating his investments. August's smile was cold. Your payment has already been wired to your preferred account. The Russian's face worked through several emotions before settling on resigned acceptance. He barked orders in Russian, and his men lowered their weapons. He's yours then? Petrov spat on the ground near Callum's feet. Good luck collecting from this one. He has nothing but promises and lies. After the Russians left, August took his time circling Callum's chair. The younger Mercer's face was already showing bruises from Petrov's negotiations. You work for him, don't you? Callum's voice was hoarse. For Lachlan. Smart boy. August signaled his men to untie Callum. Your brother sends his regards. Of course he does. Callum rubbed his wrists, wincing. Come to finish what Petrov started? Actually, I'm here to offer you a choice. August pulled up another chair, sitting face to face with Callum. Your total debt stands at $3.4 million. To Petrov, the Martinez brothers, Eddie Wong, and various other individuals who were growing increasingly impatient. I can pay. No, you can't. August's interruption was sharp. Your accounts are empty. Your credit is destroyed. That little insider trading scheme with Davidson Holdings failed spectacularly. So here are your options. He pulled out 2 envelopes. Option 1. You disappear from Chicago. Tonight, your brother will arrange for enough money to get you started somewhere far away. In exchange, you sign over any claims to the Mercer name or fortune. In option 2, we make a single phone call, and every one of your creditors comes calling at once, with proof that you've been playing them against each other, selling the same information multiple times. August's smile was predatory. How do you think Eddie Wong will react when he learns you sold the same Chinatown intel to Petrov? Callum's face went pale. You're bluffing? August pulled out his phone, showing a screen full of messages. Wong's already suspicious. 1 word from us, and he learns everything. Same with Petrov, the Martinez brothers, and everyone else you've double-crossed. Lachlan wouldn't what? Let you face the consequences of your actions. August leaned forward. You tried to destroy him. Used his wife, betrayed his trust, sold his secrets. Did you really think there wouldn't be a reckoning? I had no choice. Callum's composure cracked. The debts kept piling up. When Odessa suggested, yes, Odessa, August's voice dripped contempt. How is the mother of your child? Still playing victim for the cameras while her charity fraud scandal explodes? You don't understand. We're in love. Love. August laughed. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she used you just like she used your brother. A stepping stone to wealth and status. And now, he gestured at Callum's bruised face. Look how well that worked out for you. Callum's shoulders slumped. What does he want from me? Exactly what I said. Disappear. Sign the papers renouncing any claim to the Mercer fortune. Never contact Odessa or your parents again. And if I refuse... August stood, his expression hardening. Then by this time tomorrow, every loan shark, gangster, and criminal you owe money to will know exactly where to find you. And trust me, they're not as gentle as Petrov's men. He dropped a burner phone on Callum's lap. You have 1 hour to decide. When it rings, have an answer ready. As August turned to leave, Callum called out, Wait, what about my child? August paused at the door. Interesting choice of words. My child. Tell me, does Odessa know about the fertility clinic visits you made last year? The doctors who told you you're incapable of fathering children? The color drained from Callum's face. How did you? We know everything. Every lie, every scheme, every secret. August's smile was cold. So perhaps you should be asking yourself whose child is Odessa really carrying? He left Callum sitting in the warehouse, broken and alone with his decisions. Outside, he called Lachlan. It's done, sir. He'll break before the hour's up. Good. Lachlan's voice was satisfied. And the fertility clinic records? Hit him hard. He never suspected we knew. Excellent. Make sure he signs everything before you let him run. In August, have someone tail him when he leaves. I want to know if he tries to contact Odessa or my parents. Already arranged, sir. What's our next move? Now we wait. Lachlan's voice was cold with certainty. Once Callum breaks, Odessa will get desperate. And when she does, we'll be ready. The war wasn't over, but another piece had fallen into place. Soon, they would all learn the price of betrayal. The Chicago Tribune's newsroom hummed with early morning energy. Sienna Graves sat across from her editor, watching his face as he read through her latest exposé. You can prove all this? Editor Mike Reynolds looked up from the draft, his expression skeptical. Every word. Sienna pushed a thick folder across his desk. Bank records, witness statements, internal emails. Odessa Calloway's entire history of fraud and manipulation. The children's hospital angle was just the beginning, wasn't it? Tip of the iceberg. Sienna leaned forward. She's been running this same scheme for years. Seduce wealthy men, manipulate them into investing in her ventures, then vanish with the money. The fashion business that failed? She emptied the accounts and bankrupted 3 different investors. And Mercer? Was he just another mark? No. He was supposed to be her crowning achievement. Marry into real wealth. establish herself in society, then take half in the divorce. Sienna's smile was sharp. She just didn't count on him being smarter than her previous targets. The editor's phone buzzed. After reading the message, he looked up with renewed interest. Maxwell just scheduled another press conference. 1 hour from now. Perfect timing. Sienna checked her watch. Run the story now. Let it hit just before she goes live. Watch her try to spin this. Across town, in his corner office, Lachlan Mercer was reviewing the article with Zadie. Sienna did good work, Zadie observed. The evidence is ironclad. And the timing? Lachlan asked. Maxwell's already called twice trying to kill the story. Offered exclusive access to Odessa's real story in exchange. Desperate moves from desperate people. Lachlan turned to the window, watching storm clouds gather over Lake Michigan. Any word from Callum? He's gone? August's voice came from the doorway as he entered. Took a flight to Mexico City last night. My men watched him board personally. The papers? All signed. Full renunciation of the Mercer name. Any claims to the company or trust funds. August placed a folder on the desk. He broke completely after we showed him the fertility clinic records. Speaking of records, Zadie interjected, Barbara's interview about your mental state is gaining traction. People are starting to ask questions. Are they? Lachlan's smile was cold. Then perhaps it's time we answered those questions. August, is everything ready for the board meeting? Yes, sir. All members will be present, including your parents. They think it's about voting on their motion for temporary control of the company. Perfect. Lachlan checked his phone as it buzzed. Right on schedule. The Tribune just went live with Sienna's story. They watched on multiple screens as the scandal exploded across Chicago media. Odessa's past frauds, her pattern of targeting wealthy men, the missing charity money, all of it laid bare in meticulous detail. The elevator chimed, and Sienna herself strode in, looking satisfied. Maxwell's canceling the press conference. Odessa's barricaded herself in her hotel suite, refusing to comment. And my parents? Lachlan asked, already trying to distance themselves. Barbara's publicist issued a statement expressing shock and disappointment at the revelations about their daughter-in-law. How convenient. Lachlan's voice was ice. After they helped orchestrate her entire plan. His phone rang, Barbara Mercer's number flashing on the screen. He put it on speaker. Mother, what a surprise. Lachlan, we need to talk. Barbara's usual poise was cracking. These stories about Odessa, we had no idea. No idea. He cut her off. Like you had no idea about Callum's gambling debts? Or his fertility issues? Or perhaps we should discuss his adoption papers? Silence crackled over the line. When Barbara spoke again, her voice trembled. What are you talking about? The fraudulent adoption, Mother? The fake agency? The dead notary? The covered-up affair? Did you really think I wouldn't find out? How did you? She caught herself. These are family matters. They should be discussed privately. Like the private discussions you had about challenging my mental competency, about seizing control of my company. We were trying to protect you. Barbara's composure shattered. Your behavior, your isolation, your obsession with control, we were worried. Worried? Lachlan's laugh was sharp. You were worried I'd discover your decades of embezzlement. The money you and Father stole from my company to fund your lifestyle, to cover Callum's debts. That's not. Save your denials for the board meeting, Mother. I'm sure they'll be very interested in the proof I've gathered. He paused, letting that sink in. Or perhaps we should discuss it with the SEC instead. The line went dead. Lachlan looked at his assembled team. And so it begins. August, make sure security is ready. When my parents realize what's coming at the board meeting, they'll try something desperate, Zadie finished. Exactly. Lachlan's smile was predatory. And we'll be ready for every move they make. The storm was breaking over Chicago, and Lachlan Mercer intended to be the lightning. The Mercer Towers boardroom occupied the entire top floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. Storm clouds had gathered over Lake Michigan, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the tense faces of the board members gathered around the massive oak table. Roland and Barbara Mercer sat at one end, their usual confidence notably diminished. Patricia Morrison, their lawyer, whispered urgently in Barbara's ear as thunder rolled outside. Lachlan entered last, Zadie at his side with a stack of folders. August took up position by the door, his presence a subtle reminder of who controlled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Lachlan began, his voice carrying easily through the space. "I understand my parents have called this emergency meeting to discuss concerns about my leadership." "That's correct." Morrison stood, all sharp angles in her designer suit. "We have documented evidence of erratic behavior, questionable business decisions, and possible mental instability that, before we continue," Lachlan interrupted smoothly, "I believe the board should review some relevant information." He nodded to Zadie, who began distributing folders. "What is this?" Barbara's voice wavered as she opened her copy. "Evidence," Lachlan replied, "of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy spanning 2 decades. He turned to address the board directly. "My parents, aided by my former brother Callum, have been stealing from this company since its inception. These are baseless accusations." Morrison protested, but Roland's face had gone ashen as he reviewed the documents. "Baseless?" Lachlan pressed a button, and financial records appeared on the room's screens. "Perhaps you'd like to explain these transfers, Father?" The millions moved through shell companies to offshore accounts. The systematic theft disguised as consulting fees. "Son," Roland's voice cracked. "We can explain." "Please do." Lachlan's smile was razor-sharp. "Explain how you used company funds to cover Callum's gambling debts. How you created fake positions to funnel money to your personal accounts. How you orchestrated this entire crisis to try to seize control before your crimes were discovered." Barbara stood abruptly. "This is manipulation. He's trying to distract from his own instability." "Speaking of manipulation, Mother," Lachlan cut in, "shall we discuss Callum's adoption papers? The fraudulent documents? The dead notary whose signature you forged?" The blood drained from Barbara's face. "You have no proof." "I have everything." Lachlan's voice was cold steel. "Every document. Every transaction. Every lie you've told for the past 30 years. He turned back to the board, including evidence that they conspired with Odessa to stage this entire scandal. Morrison tried to regain control. "These allegations are already in the hands of the SEC." Lachlan smiled as several board members gasped. "Along with proof of your involvement, Ms. Morrison. Those billing records showing you helped them hide assets? Very incriminating." "You're bluffing." Morrison's voice wavered. "Am I?" Lachlan nodded to Zadie, who opened her laptop. "Perhaps we should play the recording of your meeting last week? The one where you discussed using the mental competency challenge as cover for their financial crimes? You bugged my office." Morrison's face flushed with rage. "I bugged everything." Lachlan's voice was ice. "Every meeting, every phone call, every desperate attempt to hide what you've all been doing." Thunder crashed outside as Roland finally broke. "Son, please. We can work something out. Like you worked something out with Odessa." Lachlan's laugh was bitter. "Coaching her on how to maximize her settlement? Helping her plan this entire charade. We were trying to protect the family name." Barbara's composure cracked completely. "The family name?" Lachlan's voice could have frozen flame. "The same name you're about to destroy with your criminal charges?" He pressed another button, and news headlines appeared on the screens. The Tribune's latest story was breaking. Mercer family fraud. Decades of embezzlement exposed. "The SEC will be here within the hour," Lachlan informed the stunned board. "I provided them with everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence of what these people have done to my company." "Our company," Roland shouted, standing so quickly his chair toppled backward. "I built this." "You built nothing." Lachlan's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You rode on my success, stole from my work, and plotted to take what you never earned." He turned to the board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, I move for the immediate removal of Roland and Barbara Mercer from all positions within this company, pending criminal investigation." "You can't do this." Barbara's voice was shrill. "Were your parents?" "No." Lachlan's smile was cold. "You're criminals who happened to raise me. And now you're going to face the consequences of every choice you've made." The board vote was unanimous. As security arrived to escort the former Mercer executives from the building, Barbara made one last attempt. "Lachlan, please. Think about what this will do to the family." "The family?" He looked at her with something close to pity. "You destroyed that the moment you chose greed over loyalty. The moment you helped Odessa and Callum try to take everything I built." Roland struggled against the security guards. "This isn't over. We'll fight this." "With what?" Lachlan's voice was deadly quiet. "Your assets are frozen. Your accounts are flagged. Even your house belongs to the company." He straightened his tie. "I warned you what would happen if you crossed me. Now you get to live with the consequences." As his parents were led away, their protests echoing down the corridor, Lachlan turned back to the remaining board members. Now then, his composure was perfect, as if he hadn't just orchestrated the destruction of his own family. "Shall we discuss the company's future?" Outside, lightning split the Chicago sky, illuminating the storm that was about to break over the city's elite. The Peninsula Hotel's luxurious lobby fell silent as Odessa Calloway burst through the revolving doors, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. Rain had ruined her carefully styled hair, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. The latest Tribune headline screamed from every tablet and phone in sight. "Mercer's scandal deepens. Parents arrested on fraud charges." "Mrs. Mercer!" Trevor Maxwell hurried after her, his usual media-polished appearance notably disheveled. "We need to discuss our options." "Options?" Odessa spun to face him, her voice sharp enough to cut. "What options?" "The prenup is ironclad. Callum's vanished. And now the Mercers are being led away in handcuffs." "What exactly are my options?" "If we file an emergency motion." "Emergency motion?" She laughed, the sound bordering on hysteria. "Have you seen the news? Every fraud I've ever committed is splashed across Chicago's media. The Children's Hospital Board is pressing charges. My former investors are coming forward. Everything is falling apart." The elevator dinged, and August Navarro stepped out, his presence causing Odessa to stumble backward. "Ms. Calloway." His voice was professionally neutral. "Mr. Mercer will see you now." "See me?" Her hand unconsciously moved to her swollen belly. "I didn't." "You've been trying to reach him for days," August reminded her. "He's decided to grant you 5 minutes." Maxwell stepped forward. "As her attorney, I insist on being present." "That won't be necessary." August's smile was cold. "Especially given the SEC's interest in your involvement in the Mercer family's financial crimes." Color drained from Maxwell's face. "I don't know what you're implying. The offshore accounts? The hidden assets? The conspiracy to commit fraud?" August checked his phone. "I believe federal agents are executing a search warrant at your office as we speak." Maxwell's phone buzzed as if on cue. After reading the message, he grabbed his briefcase. "Odessa, I need to handle something. We'll discuss strategy later." "Running to shred files?" August called after Maxwell's retreating form. "I wouldn't bother. We already have copies of everything." Odessa watched her lawyer flee, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. After a moment, she squared her shoulders and followed August to the elevator that Lachlan's penthouse suite occupied the hotel's top floor. He stood at the windows, watching lightning split the Chicago sky, when Odessa entered. "You've been busy," she said, aiming for her old confident tone, but falling short. "Have I?" He didn't turn. "I'm not the one whose criminal history is making headlines. Everything I did was a calculated move to destroy me and take half my fortune." Now he faced her, his eyes cold. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate you? Wouldn't find every skeleton in your closet? You don't understand." She moved closer, one hand on her belly. "I needed security, stability. So you seduced my brother? Convinced him to betray me? Orchestrated that public humiliation at the baby shower?" His laugh was sharp. "Tell me, does Callum know the truth about the babies?" She froze. "What do you mean?" "The fertility clinic records." Lachlan's smile was predatory. "The ones showing he's incapable of fathering children. So I have to wonder, whose child are you really carrying? That's none of your business?" He cut her off. "Like the children's hospital money wasn't my business? Or your history of defrauding investors?" or your conspiracy with my parents to have me declared mentally unfit. Thunder crashed outside as Odessa's composure finally broke. Fine, you've won. Is that what you want to hear? You've destroyed everything. My reputation, my future, any chance of a settlement. I have nothing left. Nothing left. Lachlan moved closer, his voice dangerously soft. You still have your freedom. For now. But the SEC is very interested in your financial crimes. The Children's Hospital Board is pressing charges. Your former investors are filing lawsuits. You can't. Can't what? Let justice take its course? His smile was cold. You chose this path, Odessa. Every scheme, every betrayal, every attempt to take what wasn't yours, those were your choices. I'm pregnant. She tried one last card. Whatever you think of me, this child will have nothing to do with me or the Mercer name. His voice was ice. You tried to use an unborn child as leverage. Used my brother's desperation and my parents' greed to orchestrate this entire plot. Now you get to live with the consequences. Tears streaked her makeup as reality set in. What's going to happen to me? That depends on the prosecutors. Lachlan returned to the window. I hear prison food is particularly unpleasant. Though given your talent for manipulation, perhaps you'll find another wealthy mark to scheme against. Lachlan, please. Her voice cracked. I'll do anything. The time for negotiations ended the moment you chose betrayal. He pressed a button, and August appeared in the doorway. We're done here? As security led her away, Odessa's sobs echoed through the penthouse. Lachlan watched her reflection fade from the rain-streaked windows, his expression unreadable. His phone buzzed. Zadie's message was brief. Maxwell's singing to the feds. He's giving them everything. The storm raged on outside, but inside, Lachlan Mercer allowed himself a small smile. The pieces were falling exactly where he'd planned. 1 week later, Lachlan sat in his office at Mercer Tower, watching federal agents escort his parents from their mansion on a live news feed. Barbara's designer dress was wrinkled from her night in holding, while Roland's usual swagger had diminished to a defeated shuffle. The SEC investigation is moving fast, Zadie reported, setting a fresh stack of documents on his desk. Maxwell's testimony opened the floodgates. Everyone's turning on each other. Details? Lachlan's eyes never left the screen. Maxwell gave them everything about the financial crimes. The fake consulting contracts, the embezzled funds, the offshore accounts. She checked her tablet. Your parents' lawyer is already floating a plea deal. In Odessa, the Children's Hospital Board voted to press charges this morning. 3 of her previous victims have filed lawsuits. The DA's office is talking about a pattern of criminal behavior. August entered his phone to his ear. After a brief conversation, he turned to Lachlan. Sir, we've got movement on Callum. He tried to access one of the hidden accounts in Mexico City. Let me guess it was frozen? Better. August's smile was cold. The Mexican authorities were waiting. Apparently, some anonymous source tipped them off about his outstanding gambling debts to certain cartels. Lachlan finally turned from the screen. And he's being deported. Should land at O'Hare in about 3 hours, right into the waiting arms of the FBI. Perfect timing. Lachlan checked his watch. Just in time for tomorrow's headlines. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Mercer? Sienna Graves is here. Send her in. The journalist entered, looking satisfied. The story's ready to run. Want a preview? Hit me. The Fall of House Mercer, a dynasty built on lies. Sienna pulled up the article on her tablet. Full exposure of the financial crimes, the fraudulent adoption, everything. Even got a quote from Maxwell about how they planned the whole competency challenge to cover up their theft. Public reaction? Social media is exploding. Your parents' society friends are running for cover, denying they ever knew anything was wrong. The charity boards they sat on are calling emergency meetings to distance themselves. In Odessa, that's the best part. Sienna's smile was sharp. Remember those fertility clinic records? Turns out she's been shopping her story to tabloids, claiming the baby is yours, not Callum's. But the timing doesn't work according to her medical records. She was already pregnant when she started seeing Callum. Meaning? Meaning there's another player we haven't identified yet. Someone she was involved with before this whole scheme started. Lachlan's laugh was genuine for once. The perfect final twist. She tried to use a pregnancy to trap not just one, but multiple wealthy men. His phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. The content made him smile. "What is it?" Zadie asked. "Eddie Wong." Apparently, some of Callum's other creditors are very interested in his sudden reappearance in Chicago. "Want me to handle that?" August moved toward the door. "No need. Let them fight over him. It'll make for an interesting subplot in tomorrow's coverage." Sienna looked up from her tablet. Speaking of coverage, the business press is already calling this a masterclass in corporate warfare. "Your stock price is up 15% since the arrests were announced. People respect strength," Lachlan observed, "and they love watching the mighty fall." "Sir," August interrupted, checking his phone. "Your father's asking to see you. Says he has information to trade." "About?" "Something about property deals from the early days. Transactions that could cause problems if they came to light." Lachlan's smile was cold. "Tell him I already know everything. Every deal, every bribe, every skeleton he tried to bury. And tomorrow, the world will know too." "What about Barbara's request for a private meeting?" Zadie asked. "Let me guess she wants to explain how it was all for the family? How they were trying to protect me from myself? Something like that." She's playing the concerned mother angle hard. "Too late for that." Lachlan stood, moving to the window. "They chose their path the moment they helped Odessa and Callum try to destroy me. Now they get to walk it to the end." Thunder rolled outside as storm clouds gathered again over Chicago. But this time, Lachlan Mercer stood above them all, watching his enemies fall one by one. "Sir?" August's voice was cautious. "What's our next move?" "Now." Lachlan's reflection smiled in the glass. "Now we watch them burn. Every scheme exposed, every lie revealed, every betrayal laid bare for the world to see." The storm broke over the city, but in his tower, Lachlan stood untouchable, having orchestrated the perfect revenge. 1 month later, Lachlan stood in his newly renovated penthouse office, watching the sunset paint Chicago's skyline in shades of gold and shadow. The Tribune's latest headline sat on his desk. "Mercer family sentenced. Decades of fraud and injustice." "Final numbers are in," Zadie announced, entering with a thick folder. "The company's stock is up 30% since the arrests. The board's unanimously behind your leadership. Every major project is ahead of schedule. And our former family members?" Roland and Barbara took the plea deal. 8 years each, plus full restitution of the stolen funds. She checked her tablet. They're being transferred to separate federal facilities next week. Callum, 5 years for conspiracy and fraud, plus another 3 for the gambling debts. The cartels are still asking questions, so he's requesting protective custody. Zadie's smile was sharp. Amazing how quickly he cooperated once he realized no one was coming to save him. August entered, his usual stoic expression showing a hint of satisfaction. "Sir, the last of Odessa's court challenges was dismissed this morning. The prenup stands. And her criminal cases? The DA's offering a deal. 3 years for the charity fraud. Another 2 for the investment schemes. Plus full restitution." August checked his phone. Her lawyer's advising her to take it. Apparently, more victims keep coming forward. "What about the baby?" Zadie asked. DNA test results came back. August handed over a file. "You were right. Neither you nor Callum. Turns out it belongs to a real estate developer in Boston. He's already filed for custody." Lachlan's laugh held genuine amusement. "She really did try to play everyone, didn't she?" "Speaking of playing people," Zadie interjected, "your parents' social circle is imploding. The country club rescinded their membership. Their charity board positions are being filled. Even their oldest friends are pretending they never knew them. The mighty fall hard in Chicago," Lachlan observed, "especially when they've built their reputation on lies." His phone buzzed a message from Sienna. "Follow-up story running tomorrow. Want a preview?" "Always." He opened the attached file, reading aloud. "From the ashes of scandal, Mercer Enterprises emerges stronger. While his family faces justice for their crimes, Lachlan Mercer has transformed tragedy into triumph." The company's aggressive expansion continues, with 3 new developments breaking ground next month. "Quite a turnaround story," Zadie commented. The board must be thrilled. They appreciate strength, Lachlan replied, and they respect someone who can't be manipulated or betrayed. August's phone chimed. After reading the message, he looked up. Sir, Barbara is requesting one final meeting before her transfer. Says she has something important to tell you. Let me guess, another attempt at manipulation? Some story about family loyalty and forgiveness. She's playing the mother card hard, August confirmed, talking about healing and second chances. Lachlan turned back to the window, watching his reflection in the glass. Send her a message. Tell her what I told them at the baby shower. The time for family loyalty ended the moment they chose betrayal. In Roland's letter, Zadie held up an envelope. He's still trying to explain how it was all for the family's good. Add it to the evidence file. Let him explain it to his cellmates for the next 8 years. Thunder rolled in the distance as another storm approached Chicago. But this time, Lachlan Mercer stood untouchable in his tower, having orchestrated the complete destruction of everyone who had tried to destroy him. Sir, August's voice was quietly respectful. Was it worth it? Burning every bridge, destroying every connection. Worth it? Lachlan's smile was cold as he surveyed his domain. They thought they could use family ties to bind me. Use love as a weapon. Use trust as a tool for betrayal. He turned to face his loyal allies. Instead, they learned the most valuable lesson of all: never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. The storm broke over Chicago, lightning illuminating the skyline that Lachlan had fought so hard to build and defend. In his reflection, he saw not the broken family man they'd tried to paint him as, but the emperor they'd foolishly tried to dethrone. They had all wanted their share of his success, thinking they could take what they hadn't earned. Instead, they learned the true meaning of consequences. While they faced years in prison, their reputations destroyed and their schemes exposed, he stood stronger than ever. Lachlan Mercer had promised them a reckoning. In the end, he delivered something far more satisfying: the perfect revenge.